If you're performing competently and you're super comfortable, you're not challenging yourself. You're not doing anything interesting. You should be pushing. You should be slightly uncomfortable. You should be, you should be kind of, I'm not sure if I know how to do this. I'm not sure if I can hack this. I don't know. And then you figure it out. I mean, the heartening thing that occurred to me at some point, and I always think about, is Jimi Hendrix once really sucked at guitar.
Welcome to Unity Now, the podcast where we discuss unity in the face of division. Inspired by the Unity 2020 plan, we strive to unite Americans by highlighting the middle ground between the two dominant parties and promoting the individual over groups. Each episode, we will bring you exciting, well-informed guests and host nuanced conversations about politically charged subjects. Our goal is to bring an end to the ideological war threatening the collective well-being of this great country.
Welcome back to Unity Now. My guest for this episode is Angel Eduardo. Angel is a writer, musician, photographer, and designer based in New York City. He is a staff writer and content creator for Idealist.org, as well as a columnist for the Center for Inquiry, where he writes on science, communications, skepticism, and morality. He also serves on the advisory board for the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, or FAIR. Angel first came across our desks when we heard about his concept and article about Starmaning. We talk about this idea, where it came from, why Superman is better than Jesus, at least as an ideal, and some of Angel's influences, like the late great George Carlin. To begin, we present a reading of his article on Starmaning.
How to Starman, Arguing from Compassion, by Angel Eduardo. Anyone who has spent time arguing on social media has heard of the straw man fallacy. It's a flaw in argumentation in which a caricature of a point is substituted for the real thing, making it easier to refute. If someone posits, for example, that universal basic income, UBI, could ameliorate the loss of jobs due to automation, a straw man would be, so you want people to sit at home all day and collect free money? Recently, the term has become a cudgel in the cultural wars, with both ends of the horseshoe cynically wielding it for their own purposes. This is unfortunate because the value of the straw man is that it highlights a communication error and offers us an opportunity to correct it. To avoid straw manning, we're encouraged instead to steel man, or intentionally respond to the strongest version of the opposition's argument. In this case, something akin to, you want to decouple work from basic economic security so the changing landscape of labor doesn't lead to destitution. Steel manning ensures our own understanding of the argument and also signals to our interlocutor that we're acting in good faith. Unfortunately, this sage advice is rarely heeded. We're far more likely to not only strawman, but also to vilify and mischaracterize our opponents themselves, fomenting enmity and rendering dialogue impossible. A new prescription to correct this more consequential error has been long needed, and in the nascent hours of 2021, something dawned on me. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd blow our minds. Inspired by Bowie's lyrics, I've adopted the term starman to describe a rhetorical step above the steel man, a kind of platinum rule to improve upon the golden one. To starman is to not only engage with the most charitable version of your opponent's argument, but also with the most charitable version of your opponent by acknowledging their good intentions and your shared desires despite your disagreements. In our UBI example, starmanning would be to amend the steel man with something like, and you're in favor of this because you think it will help people lead safer, freer, and more fulfilled lives, which we both want. If used properly, starmanning can serve as an inoculant against our venomous discourse and a method for planting disputes on common ground rather than a fault line. No doubt some cynics will bristle at the seeming naivete of calling for civility towards monsters. I understand their skepticism. Many of our beliefs feel more like identities, and to disagree with those is to negate our very existence. The thought of extending charity to those looking to erase us seems masochistic, even suicidal. But this perception of existential threat is an illusion. Yes, there are monsters in the world, but they're so few in number that you're unlikely to actually encounter one. More often, you will run into ordinary people under the influence of bad ideas, ideas that lead them to think and act in misguided, even monstrous ways. And of course, they'll be thinking the same thing about you. Our error is in assuming these people are lost to us. The fact is that the vast majority of us want the same things. Our disagreement is always in the details. To Starman is to use this bedrock of commonality as a place from which to build good faith. It's an exercise in compassion and understanding that we are all products of our circumstances. Different people have different upbringings, educations, beliefs, values, and temperaments, all of which inform their opinions and behaviors. We will often have conflicting ideas about how to move forward in the world, but most of us will agree that we want to move forward. If you doubt this, ask around. I wager you'll be hard-pressed to find someone who wouldn't want a safer, fairer, more just world for everyone if they could get it. In practice, Starmanning is about holding this compassionate perspective in mind. We want to frame our approach in our understanding that we're all acting in service of our shared goals. The why and how of people's perspectives are illuminating, and with this newfound guiding light, we can engage them with more nuance and humility. We can now argue in truly good faith because we recognize not only our opponent's arguments, but their humanity. You may be wondering, what about the monsters then? What about Nazis and white supremacists? Many of us are loath to admit it, but even those people aren't very different from you or me. They have a worldview just like we do, and they believe it just as fervently. If you ask them, they'd be able to explain precisely why they think their conception of things will lead to a better world. They're totally wrong, of course, but why they're wrong and how they arrived at their point of view is just as important to understand. It's also the way into changing their minds. Just ask David Davis, a black musician who collects the robes of KKK members he's de-radicalized through conversation. Davis is proof that even the most hideous among us carry a sliver of humanity within them, and within that is the same foundational goal that we all share. Yes, Nazis and white supremacists represent a particularly deranged set of ideas, but with compassion, it is possible to tease the humanity out of even them. If Daryl Davis can convert Klansmen, surely you can find common ground with someone on the other end of the political spectrum. The key to Starmanning is the recognition that, while there's no shortage of terrible ideas, most of us are not as opposed to one another as we think. Our discourse is rife with belligerence and bile, and our platforms are designed to stoke polarization. Ideological capture is difficult to overcome, but it is possible if we consciously dial the temperature down. We should argue. We should fight for what we believe in. We should stand up for ourselves and others, but we should also be careful not to make monsters of mere men and women of different minds. If you're still unconvinced, if you're reflexively rejecting this notion outright, you have to ask yourself, why? Why wouldn't you want to acknowledge your interlocutor's humanity, your mutual quest for safety, security, and satisfaction? How would compassion for your opponent affect your pursuits? I worry about the answers to those questions, and so should you. Of course, just because you're acting honorably doesn't mean anyone else will, but someone has to be first on the dance floor. Besides, you never know who might respond in kind until you try. If we're to make any progress, we need to actively foster a culture of good faith and honesty based on the knowledge that we all have the same fundamental desires. It begins with each of us making the choice to see the other as human, flawed, perhaps ignorant, maybe even dangerous, but also human, no matter what they think. It continues by encouraging these exchanges in others and praising Starmanning when we see it. Many may still think this idea naive, but they're wrong. Idealism isn't naivete, it's ambition. It's a refusal to concede the future to the present. It's knowing how you want the world to be, orienting your behavior in that direction, and trying to inspire others to do the same. It's also an acknowledgement that our fates are intertwined. Whether we ultimately agree or not, whether we try to communicate or not, whether we choose to be compassionate or not, we have to accept that we're all on the same boat. We will sink or sail together, and we ignore this fact at our own peril. Let's not. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He's told us not to blow it, because he knows it's all worthwhile.
Welcome back to the podcast, and my guest tonight is Angel Eduardo. Angel, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time. We know you're probably getting busier and busier as a lot of your articles and interviews come out. So we really appreciate your time tonight. As I just kind of mentioned, we brought in the episode here with an audio reading of your article, How to Starman, Arguing from Compassion. So we want to kind of really touch on that, because that's really what got us interested and kind of came across our desks with the podcast team to kind of understand the thought process behind that article. I know you lay into a little bit of why you think it's necessary, but if you could tell us why you thought it was necessary to write the article in the first place.
I think probably the pandemic had a lot to do with it, but generally speaking, I've always been interested in communication and how we communicate, and particularly interested in when communication fails. For example, I'm a big fan of Sam Harris's podcast, and there are a few podcasts that he did, especially early on in his podcasting career, where they were actually train wreck conversations. So there's a particularly intense one that's like 3.5 hours, something like that. He called it the best podcast ever. And it's a real train wreck. And then there's another one that he did with Mariam Namazi. And I listened to those episodes multiple times, just because I was fascinated by why the dynamic wasn't working. What happened there where, they were talking past each other or not understanding each other, or just there was just so much bad faith that communication was impossible. So I'm just really interested in that, just to begin with. But I think because of the pandemic, because everybody was home, because the real primary way that we were communicating with one another was through social media, and particularly through Twitter, I just noticed how my approach to discourse, my approach to communicating with people, particularly people that I disagree with, which has evolved over time, but it was in short supply. There's a lot about the algorithms, and there's a lot about the way that having our discourse be in public, and kind of there's a performative aspect to it, that compassion just vanishes. And what we do is vilify and straw man. We create caricatures of our opponents, the people that we disagree with. They're not just wrong, they're evil. They're not just wrong, they're horrible, immoral, despicable human beings who need to be destroyed. And it's not just that their arguments need to be refuted. It's not just that their positions need to be challenged. It's that they need to be destroyed. They need to be ruined or, humiliated or just otherwise, silenced, stifled, all that stuff. And that attitude is not conducive to productive discourse. And I guess it always boils down for me that without communication, we have no tools left except for violence, except for literal coercion. And I don't want that. I prefer communicating, however hard it is. I'm wrong, you're wrong, everybody's wrong. We're always going to be more wrong than we are right. And we're always going to misunderstand one another more than we understand, because there are a million ways to misunderstand and only a few ways to get it right. So, it's just really important that we do this. So, it just occurred to me at some point, I listened to the Bowie song Starman, and it just occurred to me, oh, this could be the name that I can give for this kind of approach.
Yeah, and so it's something that's we don't think is available to us, but it's the Starman waiting for us somewhere. I
Right.
see the kind of the mythological concept behind maybe the thought process there. Is that close to kind of how you grabbed onto that a little bit?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it's really just new packaging, right? Because, having compassion it's not my idea, right? It's something I learned from wise people who came before me, generations and generations and generations of people who've thought and said and done the same things. It's not a new idea, but I just, I came up with a nice kind of catchy, pithy way of packaging it, and it works. It seems to resonate with people. It makes it kind of easier to click in your head and try to employ, which I think is important. So, I'm thankful that it's been helpful. I'm thankful that it's caught on. I was excited about it when I wrote the piece, but I didn't really think that I would still be talking about it a year later, so it's been a welcome surprise. But I'm glad that it's helpful. A lot of people have come to me telling me that they appreciate it, that it has changed the way that they approach things. And I mean, I couldn't ask for more. That's a wonderful compliment. It's great that I've done this little bit of good.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you said, you wrote it a year ago.
Just
You
about.
would think that we are in, some sort of shared sort of echo chamber potentially, where we're reaching the same audiences in the middle and not on the left and right. But I wonder if it's because there's so much information that we didn't hear about it a long time ago, or are the algorithms against us trying to see the middle of this sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it's just, the incentives are to be vicious and to, perform for your crowd, your in group. It's you get more kind of immediate gratification and immediate applause and approval when you are snarky and sarcastic and mean and vicious to people that, you and everyone who agrees with you have already decided this person is an awful human being. And, productive discourse is not necessarily the thing that's on your mind. It's, I need to score points for my team, and it's all about us versus them. And, our platforms are kind of, if that's the way we're going to go about it, they absolutely can adapt to that and, reinforce it and encourage it and incentivize it. And my approach is just different. I have no interest in dunking on people or insulting people or being offensive on purpose. I find no value in it. I care very much about ideas. I care very much about engaging with people. I care very much about learning and finding out when I'm wrong about something. So I seek out people with whom I disagree or whose perspectives I just can't even fathom. Like, I just don't understand how anybody could think what they're thinking. And I start digging in. I start engaging with them. I start trying to figure out what's going on. And, I have my opinions and I have my positions and I have my strong convictions, but I like, the way that I put it is I like taking my ideas to the gym, I like working them out. And if they don't make it, good. that means they didn't belong in my head, right? So it's just, I don't think that, like I said, it's not a new idea. It's just that maybe we lose sight of it amongst the hubbub and the din and all the craziness of social media and all the kind of the way that the dials are turned, right? There's so much that's missing. So much of it is, there's no eye contact, there's no in-person communication. Everybody's an avatar and everybody's behind a screen, and there's a disconnect. And so it makes it easier for you to, misread tone or intentionally misrepresent, or, just all of these things. We have to be more careful and more deliberate in our way of communicating if we want to actually be productive.
Yeah, it's so true. And, it seems like our information and our technology is moving us even into more of avatar space than we need to. I'm curious, you talk about your convictions and why how you think and how you believe. Like, what got you to this point? Like, what sets you apart from maybe the folks you're trying to reach with an article like this, that they need to stop communicating with caricatures of each other? I'm sure you're trying to potentially reach as many of those people as you can. Well, then what sets you apart from those type of people? How did you get out of maybe their echo chambers of the bubbles that maybe they're in, to think this way in the first place?
Well, I mean, I guess I've just been wrong so many times in my life that like I've just, I carry around all this kind of guilt of every time I've made a terrible mistake and either upset somebody or hurt them or, all kinds of stuff like that. So I'm kind of always checking myself, because I'm trying my best to navigate the world in a way where I'm doing good and being good as far as I possibly can. So that's my motivation, right? And I just don't get any satisfaction out of making people feel bad or, being vicious or anything like that. So it's just not my temperament. I just don't have that in me. So a lot of it is probably just my nature. It's just, I'm just not like that. I was never the kid who wanted to pick fights. I was never that, I definitely, I definitely was a little asshole. Definitely was mean to people and stuff like that, when I was a kid, but at least from my perspective, and for whatever reason I picked up on it, it was always coming from a place of fear. I was always worried. It was always because I was insecure. And so if I was mocking somebody, that meant that I was at least above them, and so, but I noticed that about myself, and then I started to feel terrible about it. And so, all of this kind of introspection has led me to this point. So there's that on the personal side, but also just on the, social kind of scaled out side. This stuff really matters. It really, really matters if we can't communicate with each other. Terrible things happen when we can't communicate with each other, when we misunderstand one another's motives and we assume the worst possible motives and kind of project those things onto people. Terrible things happen, and terrible things are happening and have happened as a direct result of our inability to see the other side, to connect with the humanity of the people with whom we disagree, and just have a more compassionate kind of outlook instead of this kind of, team sports sort of mentality that's gone totally haywire, right? Where, it's fine to be like, oh, Boston sucks and, New York is the best, blah, 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 Yankees versus Red Sox. Like, in that context, it's fun and it's funny to, make jokes and, kind of do the whole thing. But there are times where it spills over onto the street and it's a literal fist fight and people get arrested and people get sent to the hospital, stuff like that. That's insane, right? But we're doing kind of the same thing here. And it's so much more dire and it's so much more consequential, because the ideas that we're engaging with and about are, foundational things about our society. We're talking about race, we're talking about education, we're talking about, America's founding, we're talking about law, we're talking about all these things, right? It's difficult. And I just, for whatever reason, I'm extremely aware of the fact that we have to figure out how to live together, that all of this crumbles if we don't figure this out. So that's my motivation, really. The thing that's propelling me is just, Mom, Dad, you have to stop fighting. If you don't stop fighting, the house is going to come down.
Yeah. Yeah, you're good at connecting different analogies, and that comes through in your writing for sure. It's like you
well, I might be mixing metaphors. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it fits. Left, right, red, blue, mom, dad. Kind of the same thing, and I keep thinking of this metaphor with a ship where the ship is kind of just rocking. We're on the same big boat, and every 4 years we all run to one side, and then the next 4 years we run to the other side. Right. And this ship is starting to sway faster and faster to the sides. Right. And eventually we're going to tip over. Yeah. Yeah. If we don't, at least some of us, enough of us come to the middle and agree to stay there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, another one that I heard, and I was thinking about this pretty recently, but there was a meme that I saw years and years ago when I was angrier and a little more cynical. But it was a meme, and it was a picture of a Native American, and the quote was, right wing, left wing, same bird. Right. And at the time I thought, yeah, fuck both of those guys. Right. Like, it was kind of, that's the way that I took that. I used it to I put it through my cynical filter of, being fed up with all of it. And I saw it as, it's I'm indicting both sides of this madness. And it's not necessarily that I was wrong to feel that way, but it wasn't necessarily a productive way to feel, right? But thinking about it more, I realized, we need both wings, right? A bird needs both wings to fly. We can't get anywhere with only one. If one of them is missing or paralyzed or just not functioning properly, we're either going to fly around in circles or we're going to swan dive, we're just going to go straight down into the concrete. And that sucks. So maybe it should be, left wing, right wing, one bird. And we should remember the bird. The whole point of it, the whole point of the left wing and the right wing is the bird. And we are the bird, and we can't, where in order to fly straight, both wings need to be working together towards that goal, whatever that goal is. And, at the very least, keeping communication open that's the fundamental way that we do that.
Yeah. And does the bird fly with understanding and perception of both of its wings, or does the bird just think it's controlling everything? And why does it need both wings? Yeah, there's a lot of concepts you could play with there for sure.
Yeah, right.
And you talked about groups and how it's okay for to shout Boston versus LA, or and it's okay to have those sort of rivalries. My 15-year-old he's in marching band, and he came to me. He started telling me one day he's a low brass instrument. He's a tuba. And he started telling me about how all the brass instruments, all the people, they don't really like the woodwinds. And I said, why is that? It's like, well, he gave the silly reasons, they're not us and we're not them. And basically those kind of groups that develop in high school. But you're right. We've now evolved to where we allow that sort of tribalism expand into, we can reach so many other people. And now it becomes so dangerous, and especially how we've changed some of the language in Western culture and twisted it beyond what it's really used for. I find that very interesting as well with folks like yourself that still go about writing as a medium when, we're told print is dead, yet it's expanding well beyond what print ever was, right? And so you're also showing us a better way to utilize words and to wield that language. Do you ever think about that when you're going about, writing a story? How you can take not only new concepts but also help people use the correct version of language.
Yeah, I mean, the point of writing, or at least one of the goals of a good writer, is to convey some kind of idea in a way that, the vast majority of people, at least, or the vast majority of their intended audience, will receive it and understand the point, right? I mean, poetry is another thing. It's kind of fun to have different meanings going around, but if you're talking about the stuff that I've been writing lately, at least, I'm making arguments. I'm trying to make a point. I'm trying to articulate an idea and show people kind of, my work into, like, I'm showing people my scrap paper. This is how I get to my conclusion. And this is why I think it's correct. And these are the counter arguments that I could think of. And these are my responses to those counter arguments, just so I can make it as tight as possible. And I feel like the point of this is to communicate effectively and to help other people communicate effectively, or give people ideas that maybe hadn't occurred to them before. I mean, that's the coolest thing in the world, is when someone reads something that I've written, or just, in a conversation, having a conversation with somebody, and I'll make some point that I've been thinking about, and they go, wow, I actually never thought about that, or I never thought of it that way. That's great. That's wonderful, because I've planted something in their head. And I'm always hungry for that myself, which is why I seek out people who I can't understand or who I disagree with, because I want to learn. I want to feel that same kind of, oh, wow, this guy just opened up a whole other avenue. And now I can explore that and try to figure out where I'm at with it. So, yeah, I think it's important. And again, it's just, without communicating, without our ability to communicate, we can't accomplish anything. So it's really important.
Yeah, I was just watching an episode, I think, of the Babylon Project, I think it is, you were on recently. Yeah. And I heard you talk about, in terms of World War II and, Nazis, how we are them and we are not them. And how and I think that bakes on a little bit to the language that we have used, that Hitler was able to use language to kind of turn his people who were us. They are people that would never have imagined themselves, contributing to a genocide until they were. Right. And they are, it's like Jordan Peterson's idea of, if you don't think you could have been a prison guard in World War II Nazi Germany, then think again, right? Because that line of good and evil is split down the middle of us. Yeah. And language was used back then to turn a population against another population. And now we're throwing around loosely terms like Nazis and white supremacists and racists and all these things, which can be so dangerous in the complete other direction.
Yeah, I think, well, I would specify that it's ideas that we're using words to throw around. And we may be misusing and, overstretching ideas. So the idea of, white supremacy, the idea of racism, the idea of Nazism, whatever we want to call it, we may be overextending. And we, in a lot of cases, we are overextending, calling, I've literally seen practicing Jews, like, wearing a yarmulke being called a Nazi by somebody because they disagree about something completely unrelated, right?
Yeah.
So, we're definitely doing that. But I would just say it's ideas that we're really messing with. Words are just the tools we use to communicate ideas. And I think a lot of our problem is we get hung up on the words, we get hung up on language, and we're missing the point that, language is kind of just the vessel for the ideas that we're trying to convey. So there's that. But yeah, I think, it's important to recognize that human beings are human and that we're all in that boat. We can't escape it. There's you can find it online, but it was really striking to me. You can see there's a kind of collection of photographs, and it's of, these young men and women having a picnic, going to an amusement park, having just this beautiful day, right? It's nice and sunny, and they're enjoying one another's company. They're laughing, they're smiling. It looks perfectly idyllic and perfectly normal. And then you realize, or you're told, or whatever, that these photographs are of a group of people on their day off from working at Auschwitz. And then you think to yourself, whoa, right? Because there's such a crazy disconnect there. You can't fathom that these people were, just normal, everyday people who laughed about jokes, and, they weren't just pure evil all the time, right? They were doing something heinous, genuinely, indisputably heinous, but they were people. They were just regular people. And, the odds are you would have been just like them. I would have been just like them. Everybody likes to think that they would be the one person to stand up and say no. And, I understand why we want to think that. I desperately wish that would be true if I were in that situation. But, we're human, and they were human too. That's the scariest part. The scariest part is that they were just people.
Yeah. That's why that guy over your right shoulder is a myth and a story, right? Superman.
Yeah.
It's a useful mythology, of course, somebody that savior.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you've even wrote about Superman versus Jesus in some regard on one of your articles.
Yeah, he's Jesus without the mess. That's the way I put it. Yeah.
And so the rest of us are humans. The rest of us are flawed, and the rest of us probably wouldn't stand up to 100 guards telling us, you're now going to go be, a guard over here, and you're going to join us or else.
And I mean, there are people who do that, and that's really good, right? But that's insanely difficult. And there are a lot of times where you just don't even really recognize in yourself that that's what you've become, that's what you're doing. It's easy to think, oh yeah, if I walked into a concentration camp, I would never participate in that. It's horrific. But the steps that it takes till you get there, and the dehumanization that is required beforehand, right? They don't even see these people as people. These people they're objects to them. And that's something that's an idea that was planted in their head. That's an idea that gestated, and it's based on a lot of stuff. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of all kinds of stuff. So it's not that it's impossible to withstand, but, I think in our moralizing, we often underestimate just how powerful those pressures are. Yeah.
And I'm curious, you talk about standing up to that pressure, and that there are a few, some of us would do that. Mm-hmm. What kind of pressure do you find with articles or ideas you put out? Do you get a lot of kickback now with things like the Starman article, or you have an article recently about Dave Chappelle's special and the transphobia around that potentially, or not? Do you get a lot of cancellation attempts, or people really, really arguing with you that can't see what you're talking about?
I definitely get that. Yeah. Thankfully, I haven't been subject to any kind of campaign to, have my livelihood taken from me. But it was something I was concerned about because, you just never know. And, I mean, the place where I work is wonderful, and the people are very supportive. And, it's not that we agree on everything. It's not that they all agree with me, but they respect that, I have my point of view, and everyone does. And there doesn't seem to be an issue. I wasn't sure about that when I went out on a limb, started writing these things. I was a little bit worried about it, but it turned out okay for me. And, but I was still kind of worried, because I wasn't worried necessarily that they would eject me, but that I would feel compelled to eject myself, because I wouldn't want them getting any kind of crossfire on my, on my account, I would feel terrible about that. So I would, I was worried that I would be forced to leave, to spare them the bullshit that they had nothing to do with that is now being brought upon them. But thankfully that hasn't happened either. But yeah, I do definitely get people, coming at me, disagreeing very strongly. And I try my best to engage with those people because, that's really who it matters to reach. The people who agree, that's great, but you already agree. So, what do we do with the people who don't understand or who are particularly vicious in their response? There have been a few pieces I've written that have gotten, some outsized attention because they're retweeted by somebody, prominent who has a lot of people hate following them. So we get stuff like that. But so far it's been okay. I think the biggest thing was a Newsweek piece that I wrote about, being called white for behaving the wrong way, for my supposed group identity. I'm not supposed to think this. I'm not supposed to do that or feel that or be this way or dress this way or whatever. Something that I've been dealing with my whole life, being called white for dressing the way I do, for listening to Led Zeppelin, for, reading, for being a voracious reader. And, Nicole Hannah-Jones kind of put me on blast for it. And it was a good, intense, 24 to 48 hours as a result. But I likened it to, it was kind of like being at the dentist. You feel a lot of pressure, but there's no pain. Exactly. You just, something's happening. There's an intensity, but it's a dull intensity when you put it in its proper context. And, I think I turned out okay. I came out the other side of that fairly, in good shape, I think, because I held fast and I didn't succumb to, pot shots and things like that. And I ended up actually engaging with people who started off way, way, way on the other side against me. And, by the end of the day, not necessarily fully agreeing with me, but at least seeing my point of view and being willing to talk further, which to me is that's the victory. The victory isn't convincing somebody of your point of view necessarily, right? That's something that is rare and gradual. But if you can have a conversation where by the end of the conversation, and if it's a disagreement especially, obviously, but if you can get to the end of a disagreement where both parties are open to picking it up again sometime later, that's a victory. That's great. That means we can keep going. And who knows what might happen 2, 3, 4 conversations down the line. So it was a good exercise. And, I am kind of committed to this project of, trying to be the example, trying to be this guy as best I can, trying to embody the ideals that I have as best as I can for all my flaws and, for all the mistakes I'm bound to make and have made. So I saw it more as an opportunity than as any kind of attack. I saw it as like, okay, let's do this. Let me see if I can get through to Nicole Hannah-Jones, or let me see if I can get through to the people following her who are tweeting in the comments. So it was okay. It was okay.
Yeah, what you just went through there kind of brings up one of our other episodes for a couple reasons. We had Eric Smith from Free Black Thought, and he's, I think, Redders of York on Twitter.
Yeah, I love Eric.
And yeah, we had heard him on a panel he did with Root Quarterly and Heather Sheen Blakesley. And he talked about being called a racist because he likes Led Zeppelin. And
right.
So we surprised him on the episode. And when I went through my intro, I then overlaid rock and roll, nice. Led Zeppelin. And that got him laughing. And, we kind of talked about that. What could be so more stupid than saying that, you're a racist because of music you like? Like, how have we got so far? That's kind of the question I had with him. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but it's just, to me, it's one of those things where it's that caricature thing a little bit, but it goes much deeper, and it's where I think we're headed and where we've come from, in that we just need to find more ways to hate each other. We need to find somebody to blame for the inequalities that come from a whole other reason that I get from an idea from actually Eric Weinstein. But that's a whole other podcast probably. But yeah, and then Eric Smith also talked about, we talked and joked about the IDW. And, you talked about Sam Harris and how you listen to him, and you try to seek out these people that you don't understand, and you want to try to figure out their thought process. And he's certainly one of those people. And he was one of the original IDW members. And, my thought process, the intellectual dark web has not gone away. It's actually grown. And I think you're a full member now. And, and Eric Smith actually said, we're like the Avengers. And so I know you like Superman, but maybe you're one of the newest members of the Avengers.
I'm wary of joining a club.
Of any sort.
Yeah, I mean, the IDW thing was supposed to be kind of tongue in cheek. It wasn't really a group, but then people started treating it and speaking of it as though it were a legitimate group, and I think that was the beginning of the end right there. Because the minute there's a group, there is a group against it, and the minute there's a group, there's in-group, out-group stuff. And I want to avoid that as much as I possibly can, right? I mean, we're all human. We're going to have biases. I don't claim not to have biases, but I'm trying my best to, I will ally with people who I agree with, of course, and I will try my best to collaborate and do good things. So I'm cool, I'm cool being in a Justice League type situation, but I would never call myself an IDW person. I would never, if I was handed a membership card, I would refuse it. I always tell people it's the Groucho Marx thing of I would never want to be a part of any club that would have me as a member. So,
well, I mean, fair point. All of that, of course. But I think what's unique about the IDW and why it's not actually gone, although it appears to be, is that the characteristic of it is that these are individuals.
Right.
Right. And they're never going to group out because they're individuals. Right. So you can't be in the IDW if you want to group everyone together.
Yeah.
That's the first characteristic of the it's a group that's not a group, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, but that was definitely the conceit, but it doesn't work that way. It very quickly just became a group, just like every other group. And at least in the way people talked about, I mean, the minute, Barry Weiss wrote an article about it, profiling these people who are the IDW and all this stuff. And then people were like, oh, I don't know. Am I in the IDW? And, now there's this thing. And I think, I immediately recoil there because I've just seen it too many times. I've seen it happen too often. I'm like, the minute what is it? The George Carlin thing where he says, I love individuals and I hate groups of people. I hate any group of people with a common purpose because pretty soon they have, fight songs and armbands and hats that you have to wear and people that we're going to visit at 3 a.m. And I see it coming and I'm just like, I'm good. And I mean, even Sam Harris was like, well, he never thought of it as a group in that way, but it kind of became that way. And he's like, well, here's my membership card. You can have it back. And I'm like, well, I never want it. So
yeah,
I get where you're coming from and I know what you mean. But there's a sense in which the minute you label it that way and the minute people start talking about it that way, it becomes the thing, whether you want it to or not. And I do think that, to varying degrees, there was, blindness within that, to things that didn't make sense. And, people were hesitant to disagree with one another on certain issues, right? Because the conceit is we're willing to disagree amicably, which is great. But there are things you're maybe less willing to criticize one another on because you have this common project now. And so I try to avoid that just because I want to be as honest as I can. And I just, I worry. That doesn't mean that I'm not willing to ally with people or connect with people or work with people. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I thought that wasn't possible. But I'm trying to be
Right.
careful about, putting a badge on my chest and, having that kind of thing and speaking as a we kind of thing. Things start to get murky there. So I'm wary of it, and I'm trying to be careful. That's all.
Yeah, I've heard you reference George Carlin in another time. I think talking about pride in the and related to the flag burning and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. It seems like artists like that certainly speak to you.
Yeah.
Is that one of your big influences from an artist standpoint, and what are some others?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. George Carlin profoundly affected the way that I think. I found his comedy when I was in high school, and it was mind blowing to me. I hadn't encountered many people that were that smart, and who he was an exceptional writer. So I immediately gravitated towards that, just instinctively. This guy knows how to turn a phrase. This guy knows how to encapsulate an idea in this perfect little nugget. And I admire the craft and I admire his mind. I learned so much from him about how to approach things and giving things that critical eye. And yeah, Superman, a big influence ever since I was a kid. He's the ideal we strive towards. He replaced Jesus in my life. It was kind of that thing of what would Superman do, not what would Jesus do. I wasn't very impressed with Jesus. I think Superman has cooler powers, cooler story. It's more coherent, and no one has ever been murdered on his behalf. So it's a pretty good record as far as I'm concerned. And and we all know he's not real, which is great because it puts so much just bullshit off the table, right? We don't have to worry about that. We know he's not real. The whole point is that he's not real. And so we can just kind of move on and enjoy him being a symbol for these things that we aspire to be without all the, fighting over land and, crazy shit like that. And
The mess.
yeah. And yeah, I mean, I try to be inspired by ideas, however they're manifested, so films and books and poetry and, just, thinkers. I mean, Sam Harris is a huge influence as well. I've learned so much and I've changed my mind so much just from listening to him about things. I mean, free will was the thing, he convinced me of that. I'm an avid meditator because of him, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I seek out people that I think are way smarter than me, and I try my best to absorb everything I can and kind of incorporate it into my worldview and my perspective.
Yeah, that's great, and I do that too. And part of that is bringing on people like you to learn from. So it's a we get two things from it, right? We get to show you the audience, but I get to learn from you. It's like what Joe Rogan has talked about that as well. It's like he's just a curious person, but he's learned so much from the guests. So it's like he gets to read 10 books a week or something like that. It's so much information that you get to learn from.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
that's what
those are the best episodes of Rogan's podcasts, are when he has some kind of physicist or something on there, just blowing his mind about something. It's fascinating. And yeah, he's very good at being curious about the things he's curious about.
True.
Yeah, but thank you. I appreciate it. I'm trying my best. I stand on the shoulders of giants. But I'm doing my best to be good and do good and make sense and be honest and kind of show people that it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to, engage, because it's all a benefit. I mean, being wrong is the best thing that could possibly happen to you, or finding out that you're wrong is the best thing that could happen to you, because you've now been spared who knows how long of being a fool about whatever the thing is,
Yeah, it's like that's what I always say about trying new things. It's like, go be bad at something new.
Yeah.
right? Because until you're bad at it, you can't be good at it. You have to learn from your mistakes. So if you're really, really good at something, then how can you make more mistakes and how can you learn anything new?
Right. Yeah. If
So it's the same idea.
you're performing competently and you're super comfortable, you're not challenging yourself. You're not doing anything interesting. You should be pushing. You should be slightly uncomfortable. You should be, you should be kind of, I'm not sure if I know how to do this. I'm not sure if I can hack this. I don't know. And then you figure it out. I mean, the heartening thing that occurred to me at some point, and I always think about, is Jimi Hendrix once really sucked at guitar. There was a significant chunk of time where a young Jimi Hendrix picked up the guitar and he sounded like absolute dog shit. And that's good to know, That's good to know.
That's a silly little thing, but that's so powerful. You're right.
It's good to remember.
I mean,
somebody told him to stop because it sounded so terrible. Like that.
Shut up.
Like Jesus Christ, this is awful. Like, you need to quit. It's not going to happen. I'm sure that was the case for a while. Obviously he was magnificent, but he had to have sucked, right? He didn't just know how to play. He had to learn how to play. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of those truths that is obvious and apparent, but it doesn't come to you until you really think about it. So yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So your bio talks about working on a book length memoir project. Is there anything you want to tell us about that and what's going on there?
Yeah, it's I've been working on it for a long time. It's I started it right before I finished my undergrad. I took a memoir writing class, and that was my kind of final project, was the beginning of that. And I didn't know it would be a book, but the feedback that I got from my professor, who I'm good friends with now, she said, this could be a book and you should think about that. And so I did, and I sat on it for a year, and then, a bunch of writer friends and I started meeting and sharing work, and I thought, I can use this as a way to structure my writing the book. I can learn how to write this book as I'm doing this with them. And I started to work on it on and off. And I haven't touched it in a bit because I've been writing all this other stuff and doing all this other stuff. But it's about growing up with and without my father, kind of at the same time. There was an emotional distance and a physical distance, even though he was there. And it's about how I learned to become a man without a man's guidance, like how I scrambled my way through to manhood. But it's also about how I learned to have compassion for him and his situation and the way that he came up. I mean, he kind of had a similar struggle. His father died when he was really young. And so he kind of had to fend for himself and just figure it out. And part of the coldness came from an inability to connect with that, an inability to know what to do for me. And so I had to kind of do it myself, kind of the way he did. So it's a kind of coming of age thing, but it's also a coming into compassion sort of thing, of a recognition of, I'm seeing these struggles. I'm kind of living what he had to live through, and I'm kind of understanding him a little bit better now. And the anger becomes compassion. A lot of the anger as a young person who, all they want is just somebody to be there for them. All that anger kind of becomes compassion. It turns into, I understand, it still sucked, but I understand why this happened the way it did. I understand that you did the best you could, even though, it wasn't satisfactory, but given the circumstances, that's what happened. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on, and I'm getting there. I want to start picking it up again, but we'll see how long it actually takes. Well, who knows?
Yeah, I think you basically just described Starmaning.
Yeah.
In that scenario, in giving compassion to someone else and not just reflecting on your own experience and saying, well, this is how it affected me, so it's a terrible thing that you did.
Right.
That's interesting. Did you Did that come to mind at all when you thought of the Starmaning concept?
Yeah, I mean, I think I realized that so much of my art, so much of the work that I do, of the things that interest me are about, kind of seeing the other side and having a wider understanding. And I when I started writing it, I was just kind of still angry, and I was writing those parts of my story in that way because that's the way that I felt. And in the process of writing it and just living my life in the meantime, getting to that age where that transition started to happen, you start to recognize, I mean, if you're writing honestly and if you're trying to do a good job as a writer, you can't have two-dimensional characters. You can't have a character who's pure evil. I mean, you can, but it's going to make it less compelling because nobody's like that, right? Hardly anybody is just pure, unmitigated evil with zero redeeming qualities, right? Most people are, that thing of everyone is the hero of their own story, right? Everyone has an explanation for the way they are and why they think what they think and believe what they believe. And you have to learn to recognize that when you're a writer. You have to learn that you can't judge your characters. You have to try to make them full, well-rounded human beings, and that at least from their point of view, everything they do is justified. And so writing has helped me kind of acquire that perspective, even in the most kind of difficult situation for me where, there's a lot of emotional trauma, there's a lot of pain there. But in order to be truthful, I had to try to understand what's going on here, So it was very helpful in that way. And yeah, I just realized that compassion is a huge theme in all of my work. Everything that I do is about connecting with the story underneath and connecting with the wider perspective and trying to understand the perspectives of other people. So yeah, they say that every writer is basically just writing the same thing over and over again, which I guess that's what I'm writing over and over again.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's you mentioned how people are rarely truly totally evil, truly totally good. I always think back to the show Breaking Bad.
Right. Yeah.
It's like if you made that a movie, then you could certainly characterize Walter White, the character, as this awful human being, meth dealer, kills people, and eventually takes down his whole family and dies. Spoiler alert, I guess. But you could, if you string it out over 6 seasons or whatever it is, then they have the chance to show that story.
Right.
And that's, I think, as I've gotten older, that's the type of shows I've gravitated toward, where they're writing a story to follow the story and to follow the character and to develop it. And that character starts as a dad who wants to take care of his family, which is an honorable intent. No one would ever claim that's not honorable, right. But it unravels fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And the only way it could end is with, the destruction of everything, unfortunately.
Yeah, that show is a wonderful example because even the writers were saying, they got to a point where they were like, I mean, this guy is irredeemable. There's nothing about him that I like anymore. He has fully become a monster, in the later seasons. Yeah. But people were still rooting for him. People were still connecting with him and they were still on his side to the point where, the character of Skylar, his wife, was hated when she was absolutely a victim in that situation. But, they hated that character because she was a killjoy. She was kind of spoiling the fun, right? And so, there is the entertainment aspect to the television show and all that kind of stuff. And, I see it from that perspective. But it's interesting because, even the writers of the show had to kind of get off the train at a certain point. And, they couldn't really find themselves connecting with Walt anymore but the audience remained. And I think it's because the audience saw it from the beginning. They saw what the story was. They saw him struggle through this stuff, and they had already connected with him. They already saw him as a human being. And they were in his head justifying everything he was doing the way he was. And that, you know, that's empathy, I guess, right? And it can go haywire. But that shows you how powerful it can be when you understand where people are coming from. You know, I forget who said it,
Exactly.
but it's, you know, they say it's impossible to hate someone once you know their story. And we watched Walt's story, and it became nearly impossible for us to hate him, right? I think he did horrible things, and I was not a fan, but I was still engrossed, and I still felt for him. You know, I felt for his weaknesses as a person. I felt for, you know, how overcome he was with his pride and his ego, and how blind he became to all the havoc that he was wreaking. It's fascinating stuff, but that's the power of understanding where people are coming from. You know, it's a level of connection that is, you know, in a different context. Obviously, we're not talking about a career criminal, meth dealer, murderer person. We're just talking about regular people now.
That's the point,
but
right?
that's the thing, right? Like, you know, not everyone is Walter White. Most people are just regular people. And yeah, they might think things you think are terrible, and they might think things that are wrong. And so do you, by the way. But, you know, if you can connect with them on that human level, and you can end up seeing where they're coming from, that allows you for a level of communication and a level of connection and a level of productive dialogue that would otherwise be impossible.
Yeah, and take the people on Twitter or social media, anywhere where you think they're the most evil people, and if you could just rewind 3 years in their lives, what could you imagine you might find out about them? That they're a pretty good person. They're a human being, also like you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, every single one of them. I mean, you know, Twitter has that thing where before you retweet an article, if you didn't click on the link, they say, "Are you sure you want to retweet this?" without reading it. You know, it'd be great if there was just a random one that just, you know, came about that would just say, "Hey, quick reminder, the person you're sending this to is a human being, and they have insecurities and flaws and faults, but they're also full of love and kindness, and they have family, they have people who love them, and they love people. Maybe they have a pet, you know, that they care about, that brings them all the joy in the world. Maybe you share interests. Maybe you have the same favorite movie. Maybe you have the same favorite food. You know, maybe if you bumped into each other on the street, you might become friends. You know, maybe just remember that before you hit send, and you know, whatever venom it is that you're about to spit. Maybe think about that. Maybe think about this is a person. Just remember, this is a person. It's not a caricature. It's not a cartoon. It's not an avatar. It's not whatever their little picture is. You know, this is a full human being, and how you engage matters. That's a long message, but something like that would be nice.
You have that button. It's 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, right.
We'll call it the neighbor button, because would you go say this to your neighbor? Think about that. It's like your neighbor could be Walter White. You're not going to know, but you say hi and you smile, even if it's somebody you don't really know that well. You don't shout at them because it's somebody you see in person. Yeah. You know, so
well, the better way is just, you know, how would you react if someone said exactly what you're about to say to you? Would you be convinced? Would you want to hear more from this person? You know, would you be like, "Oh, wow, yeah, okay, let me hear what else you have to say"? Would that be your response? Or would your response be, "Fuck you, you know, what do you know? How dare you attack me this way? You have no idea why I think what I think or feel what I feel. Or you don't understand me at all. How could you judge me this way?" If that's going to be your response, if someone said it to you, why shouldn't it be the response of the person you're about to say it to? You know?
Right. If your response is going to be in fewer words and more hatred, then what's the point? What are you trying to get done here? And so you could argue that, you know, why Twitter should exist in the first place with a limitation on conversations.
Well,
but that's at least they've opened up spaces, kind of like Clubhouse, where you can actually hear people.
Yeah. I mean, Clubhouse has, at least you can kind of hear the tone of voice, which is missing on Twitter. So it really depends. There are trade-offs everywhere, but I call social media in general the boss level of discourse. It's you've been building up your skills, and you really have to have them sharp in order to get through this thing, because a lot of your aids are not there anymore. Eye contact is gone. Tone is gone. It's kind of like a video game where, you're at that last boss, there's no more health. You have limited, weaponry or whatever, like you have to shoot carefully. You have to walk carefully. It's incredibly treacherous. Everything is out to get you because they're trying to challenge you as much as possible. It's kind of like that, so when you step into this Thunderdome, you have to understand that all your discursive skills have to be on point. You have to be fully engaged and ready to account for all the things that are not there that make things easier for you in other circumstances.
Yeah, that's so true. All right, I haven't done this in a while, but I'm curious your thoughts, since we haven't touched on politics a lot, and which has been great to just have a conversation. 2024 is going to hit us before we think. If you could think of who would be an actual good candidate for president of the United States, who would that be?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't know. I'm a weirdo with that, because everyone annoys me. But like I really like Andrew Yang, and I like him because, I think he's smart, and I think that he's trying to do good. And a lot of other people are the same. But what I like about him is that he's a terrible politician. He's not. And, what I mean by that is that he doesn't have that kind of, veneer. He doesn't have that perfect pithy thing to say. He puts his foot in his mouth, and he's kind of awkward. He's just a regular person. And that to me is endearing, because he's not, he doesn't exhibit these sociopathic tendencies that you tend to see in, political people, where they can, worm their way through a response without actually saying anything. And that's just not how he is, right? And so I can forgive him any kind of, lapses in, decorum or whatever you want to say. Like he speaks like I would speak. And I that to me is great, because I don't get the impression that he's just trying to play some kind of game. I get the impression that he is really just concerned and trying to do his part, whatever level of success he gets with that. I believe in him for that reason. I think he's genuine. And I can't quite say that about a lot of politicians. Even if they do mean well, there's just, the machine is just so powerful at this point that you have to play the way that they play, or you won't even get on the field. But he's not quite doing that. And I appreciate that. But, he ran 2 campaigns and didn't get very far. So that kind of shows,
the machine
shows the
spit him
problem.
out.
But yeah, I would love someone sensible, and someone honest. I think one of the things that we should learn from the last few years is that honesty is something people actually want. And they want it so badly that they will take someone who is horrible but honest, just says what comes to mind and is just saying what they're thinking, right? And Trump was like that. He just said whatever the hell he wanted. He didn't care. He just, I don't think that, I don't know how much you wanted to get into this, but I don't consider Trump to be somebody who has like an ideology, right? He doesn't have like an ethical framework or a political framework that he's, reasoning from. I think his only concern is whatever benefits him. But he knew enough to to know, or at least to have the instinct, that if he just speaks freely, people will find that refreshing. People will see the contrast between the perfectly crafted political speech or, political quip or applause line that is, manufactured by a team of people to say nothing while seeming to say something so that everyone can like it, kind of thing. There's a contrast there between that sort of stuff and him just being insanely rude and vituperative and awful, right? And I think people's hunger for honesty is so great that they will take that, because at least there's a level of honesty there, right? Like, and Trump is completely full of shit and he lied constantly, but the manner in which he did it was refreshing to people, because it felt like an honest way of at least he's giving the finger to the people, and there's kind of a thing there. And I think there are a lot of people I read about and heard about and know who were like, I would have voted for Bernie if he was the option, but because he wasn't, I voted for Trump. And that shows that there's, something is needed, something is wanted by people that we're not giving them, that we're not getting, and we should get it. I mean, I think the right kind of honest person would be a really powerful force. But, I'm no political strategist, so who knows?
Well, I like what you said about Andrew Yang, and it kind of disqualifies him a little bit, but also really disqualifies Trump. Is that maybe the first qualification to be president should be you can't want to be president.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, who wants to be president? Everybody raise your hand. Everybody raises their hand. All right, you're out. Okay, everybody that didn't, you're up.
Yeah, but
right?
That's like an impossible game to play, because people just get hip to it, pretend not to want it. And then you get the whole spiel. There's just no way out of it. And, I don't envy that job. I would never want it in a million years. I would never take it in a million years. It's not, I was in a band with 7 people and I managed it.
That's a big band.
So we had a horn section and it was like a funk rock band, and it was big and fun and all that stuff. But I became the de facto manager. And I was, handling the booking and the scheduling and all that stuff. And just doing that was impossible. Just doing that was like, every decision I made, somebody was upset about it, no matter what, right? No matter what decision I made, someone was going to be upset about it. Someone was going to complain. And it was going to, there was no way to please everyone. There was no way to make it so that everyone was happy and comfortable all the time. It was impossible. And logistically, it was impossible. And the expectations that were put upon me were impossible. And that's just a band, right? Completely meaningless in the grand scheme of things, and completely silly in terms of like responsibility. But I was like, this is like impossible, right? So imagine running the free world. Imagine being the guy that everyone points to as you're the one in charge here. 350 million people. What are you going to do? Right? Where every decision you make is going to upset 50% of people, at the very least. It's just like, that's madness, right? And I think we have this weird idea of a presidency. We treat it kind of like being king. We think of it that way. We talk about it as if it were that way, and it's not. And it's just crazy. I can't imagine how difficult that job is. I can't imagine, there's a reason, I think, why every president comes out the other end with, gray hair and like wrinkles on their face, because it's just an intense, insane, undoable job. Like, there's no possible way you can get to the other end of it having done a stellar job and everyone loves you. It's just not possible. So, yeah, it's just
yeah, you're not wrong. It's this whole idea we've created this system where we're supposed to be in charge, but all we do is go every 4 years and say, all right, you're in charge now. Right. Good luck. And we go about our day.
Right.
And it's like, that's not really how this democracy was supposed to be set up. And we've put way too much power into this single person to wield and be the representative, the one representative of the whole country, and to be like the CEO of a country.
And even just symbolic power, not necessarily that they even have it, but we act as though they have it. Like, oh, why didn't you do this? Like, well, because I have to convince 45 people before I can even ask the question, can we do this? It's just the way that's not the way things work. And then there's also just timelines, you know what I mean? Like, everybody's always blaming the other guy for the economy. And it's like, dude, the economy doesn't just change overnight, right? Like, it takes a few years. So it's like, we're probably still in the previous guy's, economy, because that's just how long it takes for things to have an effect and things to shift. And then suddenly, we switch people and it's all their fault. And it's so weird. I don't know. It's just a totally unenviable job. I wouldn't want it. And I wouldn't get it even if I tried, because I just couldn't do what is necessary. So yeah, not for me.
All right. So we're a little bit over an hour, so I should probably let you go. Okay. We can send people to angeleduardo.com. And where else should we send them? I know you are on the advisory board for FAIR.
Yep.
And where else should we send people to check out what you're doing?
Yeah, fairforall.org is the website there. And on Twitter, I am at StrangelEdWeird. It's supposed to be StrangelEdWeirdo. There's a play on my name, but there's one character. The character limit was just one shy of that perfect, funny thing that I came up with.
It's still pretty funny.
But it works. It works.
Yeah.
So, you can find me there. And my website, angeleduardo.com. And thank you very much for having me. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, it's been likewise. We appreciate your time. Maybe next time I can get you spinning on if Batman could truly beat Superman. Maybe that's a polarizing topic for you Superman fans to get into. But we'll save that for next time, maybe.
I mean, the quick answer is yes, but only because writing.
Okay. All right. I won't ask any more questions. We'll be here another 2 hours. So, I appreciate your time, Angel. And we'll vote for you for president. And that way you are qualified because you're honest, but you didn't want the job. So good luck in 2024.
Yeah.
And
no way.
But we hope to see you again. And we'll follow you wherever you're going. And so great. Best of luck to you and all of your writing and endeavors. Yep.
Thank you very much.
All right. We'll see you next time, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And good day, good night, good morning, wherever you're listening.
Thank you for watching the Unity Now podcast. We'll be back with another conversation that highlights the political middle ground to unite Americans and end the ideological war. In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. Please comment below and hit that subscribe button.